Hi, Betsy. Welcome to the Coaching and Organizations podcast.
Hi, Dom. I'm so happy to be here.
Ooh, well, let me share a little bit about you before we start, and you tell me if I missed anything.
Okay, will
You
do.
have been a proud IMA associate and shareholder since 2012, and prior to joining, you managed EB clients at other Denver-based regional brokerage for firms. Your early career included experience in advertising, marketing, and human resources. And what I loved hearing in our conversations is that building relationships and supporting others in their growth has always been a passion for you. So in 2018, you completed a coach training program and you transitioned full time to the best job title in the world. I am a dream coach, and that was in 2022. You've lived in Colorado since 1991. You love to ski, play golf, hike, camp, read, travel, all the things that I hear people do in Colorado. And usually you do this with your son and your partner and his kids.
Mhm.
I also really loved that you included in your bio that you're honored and humbled. And I really appreciate that word to help IMA associates become their best selves, whatever that means to each of them. And that you believe fully that everyone has the ability to create what they want in their life. Did I miss anything?
Oh, nothing that is absolutely crucial right now. So, yeah, I think you did a great job. Thanks, Dom.
Yeah, thank you. And we always start with asking about your origin story. Tell us a little bit about how you actually got into coaching in the first place.
Sure. Well, I when I look back, I can see seeds along the way of that I had interest in doing something like this, but it wasn't necessarily on my radar that it could be coaching. And of course, the profession itself was growing along the way while I was creating my own career. It was roughly 10 years ago, one of our associates here at IMA, who I worked with closely in my client facing role. So by client facing, I mean our corporate clients external
Mhm.
to IMA. And he was kind of at a fork in the road with his career, and he had been long time very successful salesperson, and he we had just launched our sabbatical program, and went on his sabbatical after gathering a lot of insights from important people in his life and reading and really reflecting on what he wanted to do next. And he read a book called The Dream Manager, which gave him this idea to bring this dream coach concept to IMA. And it's not exactly the way that the book describes it, not precisely, and there's an organization behind all of that, but it was really his own imagining of what this could be like at IMA. And fortunately, our very insightful CEO got on board pretty quickly and said, "Yes, Brad, you can do this here at IMA." And so Brad started this coaching role. During that time, I also knew that I was realizing that I still had these calls within me to look at something where I could be present for others and help them in their growth. And at times I thought that meant psychology and maybe going back to school for a graduate degree, which I seriously considered at times. But I was in a conversation with our first dream coach, and I was talking about that. And he said, "Well, have you ever thought about coaching?" And it was definitely a light bulb moment for me. And I left that conversation thinking, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to seriously consider it. And so I made that leap. Once I found a program that I felt really reflected the kind of experience I wanted to have and that resonated for me, I thought, okay, here I go. I'm going to take a leap. I'm going to do this. And I didn't really know what the outcome was going to be. I didn't know exactly how I would use it, but I trusted the process. Ultimately, as things would happen, Brad did end up retiring. I continued in my role as an employee benefits account executive, and I was leading teams and I was trying to use the skills that I had learned in the coaching program in that context and wherever I could. But then it came that opportunity, and I thought, this is when I need to do it. I need to make the case that I have both the institutional knowledge as an associate at IMA And I understand the path that people have walked and are walking here. And so I made my case that I had both the credentials, the practice, the experience that I gained through the program and after, and that I cared a lot about the organization and could be an asset in this role. So I wasn't the only one who wanted the job, but fortunately, I am the one that won out in the end.
And congratulations, and I'm so glad you did.
Thank
And
you.
and so I'm curious because I love how it someone else built the coaching piece at IMA first, you jumped in, and now you're pretty much responsible for building a lot of the coaching culture there. And so I'm
Mhm.
curious how your own experience and your own moving into coaching influences how the coaching culture is developing at IMA. What are you
Mhm.
individually bringing to it?
What am I bringing to it? Well, I think that I am bringing to it the willingness to be creative and to experiment and to try new things and being authentic in that and really reinforcing that concept because I think that's very consistent with coaching and building a coaching culture. You know, um, being able to practice things and try things and maybe not get it perfect right away. Also, I see that I learned a lot in my coaching training about really seeing opportunities around me and being able to collaborate and maybe not having to have my ego be in the driver's seat all the time and still working on that. Um, but so what I mean by that in part is that it's not just me building the coaching culture, even though I have a really important part in it. Our HR team, um, who are colleagues of mine, but I don't report through the same structure. So I'm separate from HR, but they are also committed to building a coaching culture. So they have worked on programs that help with um, introducing our managers and our leaders to coaching principles and kind of rounding out that culture, right? So it's not just me, um, just one person needing to drive that culture forward. And there definitely were times where I thought, oh, should I be the one that is driving that part? And then I realized, you know what? It's not a zero sum game. We can all be a part of this together. And so I work on collaborating with them and understanding where they're going with that part of the program. And then becoming a part of the bigger picture of the coaching culture here at IMA.
Oh, thank you so much. That collaboration piece, I find from talking to a bunch of leaders who are leading coaching in organizations, it's necessary. It's so key to have that connection and making sure that we're all working together. Not one person can ever carry a whole culture, whether it's a coaching culture or whatever type of culture we're trying to build. So I love hearing that. And I think the first thing that you mentioned before you talked about the collaboration, the piece about the creativity and the willingness to try new things and not being perfect at everything, it actually is a perfect move into what we're talking about today, which is building a pilot, because that's really the meat of what we're going to dive into. Could you, before we do that, just share a little bit about the landscape at IMA in terms of coaching? Just a little bit. How does it show up in
Sure.
the organization?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we do have a couple of programs that are provided by external resources that provide coaching and coaching skills, coaching concepts to managers as well as higher level leaders. So those are two distinct programs that again are produced and presented by external resources. So really really helpful piece. And then in terms of the role I fill, I'm doing both group coaching and one-on-one coaching. Primarily when my associate Brad started the program, it really was only one-on-one coaching. That was all that piece was. And so I've broadened it to include group coaching. And so I would say that we're still in the process. So it's still something that's gaining momentum, and we're growing a lot. We have been for the last 5 years or so. So there are a lot of different initiatives going on, which makes coaching skills really important and a coaching culture really important to help support that. But it also creates those challenges of making that a priority along with all the other priorities. So I would say it's still a work in progress for sure.
Yeah, there really is a scale challenge here. When we talked earlier, you were saying really there's one coach and 3,000 employees in the company that keeps growing. When did it become clear for you that one-on-one coaching alone wasn't going to be enough? You mentioned you started to think about group coaching.
hmm Well, I saw group coaching as a way to at least help get my skills, my offerings out in front of people so that
Mhm.
they knew who I was and what I could offer. And at the time, I also had a partner in coaching. That role was eliminated last year, and so, but certainly when that happened, and I was back to being just one coach, and we were continuing to grow, that's when it became much more evident to me that it wasn't just a great accessory or a great funnel for me, but it was really an important way to be able to engage people and also help them with this process of change, which I think we'll touch on some more as we talk.
Yeah, and before we do that, I want to go back for a second to the creativity
Mhm.
piece because I think it's very much tied up to the building of the programs. You have had a rare amount of freedom to create in this role. I say rare because in a lot of organizations there is a very clear pathway or there's a very clear structure that needs to be followed in terms of any programs that are built. So I'm curious for you, what's really exciting about having that freedom to create and what's surprisingly hard about it?
Yeah. Well, um, it is fun to be able to have the opportunity to create whatever I need based on the needs that I see, or whatever I want based on the needs that I see. So that just allows me to imagine and think and see what people need, and that I think is the most important thing because really that's fundamental to coaching of any type is what is the coachee's agenda? What do they need? What are they looking for? So I'm always rooted in that.
Mm.
And so tell me the question again. I've just lost my way.
It's all good. It's all good. I was
Thank
asking
goodness for
about
editing. Yeah.
what's really great and exciting about having a ton of freedom to
Yes.
create
Okay.
and what's hard about it.
Right, right. Okay. So yeah, just that broad ability to meet people where they are and to figure that out as they go along instead of having to um, be rigid and structured and figure it out all in advance or something. So I definitely appreciate how much latitude I have with all this. It also terrifies me sometimes, frankly. And
Fair.
um, I think, oh, if only there was, a structure, or if there was some clarity around some of this. But really, the freedom I think is more important and the creativity is more important. So I do my best to embrace that. And also, I continue to think more strategically about what does the organization need also as a way of helping myself prioritize where I'm going to focus. So that's becoming more clear to me as I work through all of this.
Mm, thank you. And we'll come back to that because I think it's such an important piece. And in every organization, any intervention has to be connected to the strategic goals of the organization. So I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may come back to the freedom piece for a second, one of the things that I really enjoyed hearing about from you is that your very first pilot from or for group coaching really came from a very human signal. In your one-on-one session, a lot of women were disclosing ADHD to you, and so it made you, well, actually, let me phrase that into a question. What made you trust that pattern enough to turn it into a group coaching program? Because that ended up being the connector between all the participants in that pilot program.
Yes, yes. Well, I think it was very much the fact that I kept hearing it. It just was that it was repeated so many times. And again, going back to the coachee's agenda, and that felt like it was really important. And I think particularly with women with ADHD, don't tend to feel like they are a part of a community, or they don't know many other women who have ADHD. It's not something that people are broadly talking about, just self-disclosing out in the open. So just on a gut level, I thought, well, these women need a chance to connect with each other. There's just no question about it. And perhaps just that fact that that was coming through so strongly was a good way for me to try something out. It also wasn't, it didn't go out to the invitation didn't go out to the whole organization. So it was going to a specific list of women who were engaged in our women's network. So I knew that they were likely to be interested in being engaged in groups in some way and getting some support. So those things made it feel like it was a good bet. I think also I was not always sure how to meet them where they were because I don't have ADHD. And
Mm.
so in one-on-one sessions, I thought, well, maybe there's a way to create um, that environment and that collaboration that will help them even more than just the one-on-one situation. So that was certainly a big part of it, but it was trusting my gut and that I had the latitude. There wasn't any big mistake I was going to make. And I had done some other types of, they might not have been technically group coaching, at least not the way that it's defined by best practices, right? But I had done some other group things. But this was a good one it was a defined population and
Mm.
something that I could um, really think about what might this look like and how could it help. It wasn't too broad. It was narrowed in a little bit.
Yeah, I want to highlight a couple of things that you mentioned about building a pilot because I think for anyone who's listening and looking to build a pilot, you hit on a few very important points. One was that there probably wasn't much room to make a mistake. It was fine or rather, there was a lot of room to make mistakes. Let me rephrase that. And so I think knowing when we go into a pilot that this might not work or it might not work the way we expect it to is such an important piece of the mindset. Then you also mentioned a very defined, very clear population. I think when we're thinking about piloting any type of program or coaching program, knowing who our audience is going to be so important. And it's going to help to make the pilot truly effective, whether it's a one-on-one coaching program or groups or even teams. And the last thing I want to highlight that you shared is you kind of knew that they would be willing to be part of a group program. And I think when we're testing things out, it's really helpful to have that certainty or to bring in people who will be an ally because they'll help you think things through, they'll give you real feedback, and then
Mhm.
also they will they will be advocates for whatever comes next. And so I think I really appreciate you sharing these different elements of the thinking behind the pilot. And let me ask you a question that comes from Tracy Jenkins, who was our previous
Mhm.
guest on the podcast. She was wondering whether your outreach for the pilot program um, resulted in the participation that you anticipated in terms of numbers and interest alignment.
Yes, I think really overall it did. In fact, we got much more response than we really anticipated initially. And we had to create a kind of a cutoff. We weren't able to take everybody into the program. There were a few people who, although we were explicit about saying we wanted this to serve people who had been diagnosed with ADHD, because there are certainly a lot of women who think they might have ADHD, but we felt it was important to keep it focused on those who had already been diagnosed. And so there were some that naturally we, were letting go of and letting them know that definition. But there were also some others we just had to say, we'll try to run another one or we'll figure something else out after this. So we had a lot more participation than expected. I think we did have a couple of people who dropped out of the program, and one relayed that it didn't really that she wasn't really learning a lot of new things.
Mm.
And so that may have been maybe in the way that we set up the program, that it felt to her like she was supposed to specifically be learning new things rather than engaging in the coaching experience. But I respected where she was coming from. I mean, I had moments where I thought, "Ooh, ouch, uh-oh, she doesn't want to be a part of it." And then, okay, move on. That's okay. It's just she needs, and I respect her honestly for expressing herself and making that decision. So that was totally fine. And I think we had one or two people who ended up dropping off after they weren't able to make a few
Mm.
sessions, because we did ask for a commitment that they would make. I think we had 10 sessions, and that they would make 8 of 10 or something like that. Don't remember the exact numbers now, but it was roughly that. And our associates are very busy. They have heavy workloads, and they're doing this during their work days. And sometimes they don't have the absolute control over things like when a client meeting is scheduled. So they dropped off, and I think they felt like they uh, couldn't keep going. And in retrospect, so there was a lot going on during that time in the organization, and that was when our other coach left, and I had to collapse all of the groups into a couple that I could administer rather than 4 separate groups that 2 of us were administering, so or facilitating. And so in retrospect, what I learned was that in another pilot, I would be making sure to check in with those people and say, "Hey, I know you haven't shown up in a couple times. What's up?" Find out, see if they still wanted to continue, and see if that would be manageable and doable, rather than it sort of just tailing off and disappearing like that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that learning. And that's the point of a pilot, right? Is what is it that we're going to try out, and the willingness to, for it, as your word, not to be perfect. And
Mm.
and with that in mind, I know that when you launched the pilot, you thought it was going to be one thing, and I'm curious what it actually became once people were in the room.
Right. Yeah. So yes, I was really trying to work the group coaching best practices that I learned through your program and that I knew to be true. And also with that, we incorporated a book that was um, that was meant to help support the women in exploring their ADHD and exploring questions that they could to reflect and make some decisions and gain some more clarity, but also some tips and techniques and things like that might be helpful to them. So we followed the book along. Um, I was trying to adhere to the agenda I had put together initially, and just, okay, we're going to talk about the chapter, we're going to do an exercise from the chapter, and we're going to do this and that. And as it went on, I was feeling like maybe they really were the talking was the most important part, where they were sharing and they were connecting. And so I checked in with them again, going back to what's their agenda, what do they need, what did they want? And really what they wanted was to talk to each other. They just wanted to connect. That was the most important thing. Um, I've joked that maybe it was a little more support group than group coaching. Um, and I also decided that was totally okay. And, I think primarily if I had more explicitly taught them coaching skills early on,
Mm.
that might have shifted it a bit. But I don't feel like it's a loss. It's again more of, okay, well, I can see how that might be important in another group, or how I can institute that in another group and make that work. So I don't think it worked against the group. I think they got what they wanted out of it and what they needed. So I think the other thing I would say is just in as far as learnings, this was, I think it was 10 sessions. And it would have been certainly very easy to pilot 4 sessions or something that was a little shorter. Maybe, maybe not try to serve as many people as I did, maybe focus it in a little bit more and make it a little shorter, and then be able to iterate again more quickly. So it took a long time to unfold those 10 sessions.
And I'm curious, what then did the experience teach you about the difference between a coaching program and a support space? And as you're thinking about future pilots, why does this distinction matter when you're designing programs internally now?
I think that's such a great question, Dom, and I think it's one I'm going to continue to reflect on. I think that I think there definitely were elements of a coaching program. So we did work on things like, creating small actions that they could take and furthering that action and checking in on that. Um, and so I think though that maybe what they needed the most right now was really the support piece. Maybe that was the thing that was the distinguisher, is that they just needed that more, and that's okay. Um, and I do think there are some populations and some situations where people really are going to be looking more for a true coaching experience. And but also I think there's a lot of uh, ambiguity for people about what that means. So clarifying that, continuing to clarify that up front, what does it mean to be in a coaching space, and what is that going to look like to set expectations. So um, I think that's my best answer right now, but one I'll keep thinking on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Betsy. And I so appreciate that you were willing to let go of what you had planned so that the participants would get what they needed. At the end of the day, that's a big piece of it, is how are we serving our people? And I was talking earlier to the next guest who will be on the podcast, who also work at a they work at a financial accounting firm, and they were talking about this idea of creating a common language, really helping people understand what the program was about. And I think you also bring up a tension that you were thinking about for future programs and the strategic goals of the organization. And so I know we've talked a little bit about this. I'm curious for you, when you think about the tension between serving the individuals and so making it more, for example, of a support space, and serving the organization at the same time, how do you navigate that? Or how, now that you're thinking about the next pilot, how would you navigate that without losing the heart of the work, which is serving the clients?
Yeah, I guess for me, in a way, it's kind of a Venn diagram. It's, what are the issues, the concerns for the organization,
Mm.
and the things I'm hearing in one-on-one sessions that speak to overall trends. And then, how does that meet the individual where they are, and what is the need there? So that's really what I'm looking for, is what what is in that space where those two circles overlap, and that I can um, create a space that's really valuable, probably more valuable for the individuals because then it's happening on a group level with more people.
Mm.
So I think in a lot of ways that can multiply the benefit. It can multiply the benefit to the individuals by being able to be in that group experience. And I think the pilot taught me that again, that power of being together, as long as it truly is a safe space where they feel welcome and that they really can share.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know your next idea is around mindful change management, and especially for people who are joining through acquisitions. We mentioned earlier, IMA is growing very, very fast. What makes that the right next pilot for you?
Yeah. Well, it is the thing that keeps coming up, both in the organization and in sessions one on one. Sometimes it's not overtly called out as about a need for mindful change management, but I see the stress that can be generated by rapid change and also the need for connection between people. And so that the fact that we're growing rapidly by very friendly acquisition and but we have offices all over the place, and many times the leaders are the ones that are most intimately involved in connecting with others across the organization, but not everyone is. And there's a lot of excitement and sometimes trepidation and all kinds of different feelings about joining this organization. There are also people within the organization that are thinking about, well, IMA was this, but now we're taking on all these others. So who are we now, and what does that look like going forward? So I think that there's huge opportunity to bring people together to make them feel more connected more quickly as they join the organization, to help people know who else can do what else, what other kind of talent is there in the organization, where are opportunities, who's solving a problem that or who has already solved a problem that I'm trying to solve, et cetera. So I think it's something that could really ground and energize this time of change for us. And so and then the mindful piece of it, just, oh, everything comes back to mindfulness, it feels like, right? So being able to be present and do what's needed now, and to again be grounded and calm as we move through this, and not so unsettled by change, and thinking through it. How are we doing it? Not just changing to change, but what's behind it. So those are all pieces I think are important to address.
Mm. I really love how your personality comes through in the way you think about these pilots. I always think of you as someone who's very grounded, and in all of our conversations, you show up in this way. And so I really appreciate that everything you're building has a big part of you in it. Um, what does success look like a year from now if this pilot becomes or if any of the groups that you've tried become a real coaching infrastructure inside
Hmm.
IMA?
Yeah, again, such great questions, Dom. And in some ways, I'm still envisioning that, but I think it is creating both spaces where people can create some of that continuity and some of those relationships and psychological safety over longer periods of time, and maybe have cohorts that allow for that and enable that, but then also have ongoing kind of drop-in sessions where people can get that connection they need, but maybe they don't have the same need that they do initially to be in a cohort. Um, so, but deeper than that, I think just people seeing this program as evidence of the desire of the organization to take care with how
Mm.
change is unfolding, and to care for the individuals, and also see the great potential in each of the individuals that make up this organization. And so it is true. Sometimes people can get lost in growth and change in an organization. So this is an opportunity to create more collective connection, more of us all pulling in the same direction and feeling really good and, as I said, energized about that. So that's to me what success looks like, that this is evidence for people, that that's what we're about. We're a people first organization, and that's always been a big part of our culture. While we're still working on integrating coaching, we've always been a very people first, very caring organization. And so this is a way to do that under new circumstances in a way, or to multiply that.
Oh, thank you so much for highlighting that. I think it's easy to forget that the one of the important values of or one of the pieces that or rather, let me rephrase that. One of the things that is truly valuable in building any coaching programs is demonstrating that people are valuable, is showing the investment that the organization is willing to make in their people. And I think we sometimes forget how impactful this can be to articulate to everybody, whether it is to leadership as you're trying to get buy-in, or whether it is to the participants as you're trying to get commitment from them. It's an investment that the organization is making, and it's such a beautiful investment. I think it's an important thing to point out. So as we're coming towards the close of this call, Betsy, I'm curious about two things. And the first one is, now that you did the pilot with the women who were diagnosed with ADHD, you're moving towards the pilot with regarding mindful change management. You still have a ton of one-on-one coaching clients. What do you think a pilot is really for?
I think it is for uh, testing out ideas and concepts and learning, learning what works and what doesn't, and exploring and keeping things fresh.
Mm.
And probably even just as somebody who is piloting things, it's it's a practice in, well, it's like practicing what we preach in a way, right? Try things, take little steps. Don't be afraid to iterate, um, to see. And it allows you not to get stale, and allows you not to get too caught up in perfectionism, right? What does this look like? How can I get this perfect before I step out there? It allows you to create action rather than sitting thinking, oh my gosh, I have to have this perfect before I go out there. And but believe me, I understand those feelings, oh gosh, I don't want anybody to see this until it's exactly right. Um, the other benefit though is that really only your participants are seeing it, because they're the ones inside it. So it's not a performance. It's not a movie. Other people aren't seeing it in that way. But that's what I see it for, as really a way to try out ideas and see what works and learn for yourself and gain confidence too. That's a part of
Mm. What a great metaphor. It's not a movie. Other people are
it.
not watching it. It's not a performance. That's great.
Yeah.
What would you say is your best advice for others out there who are listening and who are looking to build the coaching culture at their organization?
I think it aligns with a lot of the things we've talked about. You do your best to leave your ego aside, that you don't have to be the one to do everything, and you can collaborate with others in the organization to broaden what is possible for the coaching culture. So as I said, and our HR team is doing some things that align with coaching. I don't have to be the only coach in the organization by a long shot. And then come to it with that spirit of experimentation and trying things out, so that it allows you to grow and learn. And don't be afraid of that. Just try something, but try it on a small scale. People are more forgiving than you think they are. They really are willing to, especially, well, I guess I would also say, like, be authentic about it. This is a pilot. I'm trying this out. I haven't exactly done this before, and I'm interested in your feedback. And so I definitely do a lot of that too, surveying, finding out how did that land. Again, that's a coaching skill. How did it land for you? How is that for you? What would you like more or less of? And being open to that, knowing that it will make things better and it will grow your confidence. So, but in the coaching culture in general, I think it's also always being mindful that you are a role model for coaching concepts. So knowing that and how you're engaging with people and guarding things like confidentiality, extremely important. Extremely important. I can't overstate that. So you have to be somebody that people can truly trust.
Thank you so much, Betsy. Um, we're going to pause here. I am incredibly grateful for your support, your willingness to share your experiences, to open up, to share what worked and also what didn't, and the learnings, because I think that's how all of us end up growing and enable you're really truly enabling others to make their own mistakes. So I'm super grateful for you being here. I believe you mentioned that you would be okay for listeners to reach out to you. So everyone, if you're
Absolutely.
listening, feel free to connect with Betsy. Her details will be in the show notes. Betsy, thank you so much. So
Thank
great
you
to
so
you.
much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, um, all right, I'm gonna keep recording, but the recording will stop here.
Mm,
Thank you. This was amazing.
yeah. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Fun. It was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about it?
Good. I mean, I think there are always times where I'm like, oh, I feel like there's probably a better answer in there, but I'm not sure what it is right now. So we'll go with what is, and know that that will serve however it does. And I'm still learning. What the way I would answer this in a year is not going to be the same as the way I answered it today, but that's okay.
And that's the case for everyone who is coming onto this podcast and for anyone who is, I think, leading anything, honestly, not just coaching, right? We do things, we try, we grow. So I'm appreciative of you being willing to share what's going on for you in this moment. And I think everything you shared is helpful for someone who is perhaps just behind you or even at the same point, in developing their own program. So I'm immensely grateful.
Oh,
Um,
you bet. My pleasure.
yeah. So I would love for you to think about a question for our next guests. And our next guests they work at Sensible and their focus, and you don't have to give me this right now,
Okay.
but I just want to share what they're focusing on. Uh, all right, so they will be working on or working, they will be talking about shifting culture, shifting coaching culture. So truly thinking about what it means to create a common language for what coaching is in the organization. Um, Starting to create programs that are going to be helpful um, for different populations. They are, let me, there was one thing that I thought was really important too. They talked about the trust that needed to exist between them and their leadership in order to build that coaching culture, in order to scale it. Um, so it's really, yeah, I would say it's really thinking about scaling coaching cultures, building trust in coaching, clarifying what coaching means, proving it with data, and then thinking about the future. So now they're starting to think about group and team coaching. At the moment, they only have one-on-one.
Okay.
So I'd love for you to think of a question. If you can get it to me by next week, that would be wonderful. And really, it's what are you curious about in the way that they are building their coaching culture? What would you
Okay.
like to know?
And what was the name of their company?
Sensiba,
Sens-
Sensiba.
Okay.
Let me put it in the chat.
Okay.
Uh, I just put it in the chat for you.
Okay. Okay. I
Um,
will think on that. So when you say by next week, you mean by sometime next week or
Sometime next week. I'm
okay.
not recording until probably the second week of April, maybe later. So end of next
Okay.
week would be wonderful.
Okay.
And
Sounds great.
if I don't have it when I'm preparing their questions, I'll reach out to you as a reminder. But end of next
Okay.
week would be awesome.
Okay. Well, I'll
All
get it done.
right. Thank
All
you. Thank
right.
you.
Thanks so much, Dom.
Yeah, thank you. Our next steps, I will be so very quickly, so the podcast, the release date, we've changed it, will be June 16th. And so probably on June 16th for the day after, we will share all the links to it. We'll share all the things. As soon as the episode is actually mixed and ready to listen to, even though it's not going to be published, I will share the link with you so you can hear it in advance of everybody else. Um, and then we'll tag you and everything, and we'll promote it. I'm very excited about it.
Sounds great. Thank you again, Dom. I appreciate you including me. It was a lot of fun and it was really good to see you again.
Ah, so good to see you and spend time. And thank you so much for being willing to be a guest. I really appreciate it.
You bet.
All
Okay.
right.
Take care.
Talk soon.
Good luck. See you soon.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.